I taught my dog to use talking buttons. What she told me terrified me. My dog Cookie is a high-energy Paplin mix with big furry ears and tufts of long fur. And when I first adopted her, I almost returned her because for the first 3 days she wouldn't stop crying. Now, of course, she is my baby. One thing that helped a lot with her energy levels and her constant boredom was the buttons. I'm sure you've seen them. Those buttons you record with your voice that dogs can press to say things like food, or play, or outside. Some people even train their cats with them. Cookie is up to 20 buttons. Sometimes she'll hit nonsense sequences, of course. And she seems to think "Owach" is a reaction to surprise. Also, I'm not sure if she grasps the emotions mad, sad, and love you. Though on days when I'm curled up on my sofa, crying from the stress at work, and she hits "love you," of course I want to believe she knows what it means. Even if she doesn't, it still makes me feel better. But even though she's imperfect in talking with her paws, Cookie is well-trained and intentional, at least with her most tangible wants like outside and food. Though I'll admit it's annoying to be woken in the middle of the night with demands for food, food, food. Anyway, one night, I was woken up by the sound of my recorded voice from the living room. Stranger. This was followed by the pattering of Cookie's little paws, followed by stranger. I admit, my heart skipped a beat. I lay in bed huddled under the blankets, reluctant to get up and investigate. For a long while, holding my breath, I lay there in silence. I listened to the dog's footsteps meander around in the main room. Finally, she pressed food a few times before coming back into the bedroom and curling up in her bed by the nightstand. In the morning, I checked around outside the house, but found no traces of anything unusual. I also did a Google search and laughed when I realized how many people have been spooked by their pets pressing stranger. I also creeped myself out with a story in the Daily Mirror of a woman whose dog pressed cold stranger. According to the article, the woman was spooked by her dog's warnings of this cold stranger in the corner of her living room. But in my case, Cookie wasn't warning me of any ghosts. One morning, she hit stranger before running to the door and growling. This was a correct usage of the button, as a UPS driver was outside. When the doorbell rang, she actually barked, something she rarely does, her hackles raised, tail down, and ears flat. I had to apologize to the driver as I accepted the package, and Cookie kept rumbling, low and deep in her throat. I told her go away, and she skulked off. Behind me somewhere, I heard the button for stranger again. Sorry, I told the driver, who was laughing. She doesn't like strange men. She sounds smart then. Do those buttons actually work? He was intrigued outside. Yeah, she seems to know them pretty well, so. FUD. Mad. Sometimes she presses them kinda randomly too, I admitted. Okay. Well, she sounds mad and like she wants food. Have a good day. I don't know what Cookie's history was before being adopted, but she's always been leery of men, at least until they've bribed her with her favorite thing, food. In any case, later that afternoon she pressed stranger again, and when I looked outside, there was a turkey in our front yard. That's when it struck me. The other night, Cookie must have seen a raccoon or some other animal that was a stranger to her. But then came the incident that made me rethink everything. I'd just come back from a visit with my parents, and as soon as Cookie and I walked in, her hackles raised. I was unloading bags when I heard, stranger. Home. This sent a crawl of icy fingers up my spine. Cookie wasn't growling or barking, but she was unusually alert. Stranger where? I asked. When Cookie just looked at me, I repeated myself. She looked around the room, and then she trotted off to wander through the kitchen, came back out and went down the hall to the bedroom. Came back to me and wandered over to the buttons. Smell. God, the chills I felt then. Did this mean there was a lingering smell of some stranger? Could it have been a strange animal? A squirrel that got in through the window maybe? Or the smell of something I brought in from outside? I went walking around the house. No signs of forced entry, though I do keep a key under a flower pot that anyone with half a brain and determination to break in could probably find. It's a safe neighborhood, so I hadn't thought much of it. Now, though, I removed the key and decided I'd get a lockbox for the front door instead. After I found a footprint in the damp soil below the window, I also decided to install cameras. Duck, meanwhile, had calmed down, and when I came back inside, I found her camped beside the food button. But the real reason I swear by these buttons and how beneficial they can be is because of what happened the next week. I was out doing some gardening and heard my name called by Greg, my supervisor at work. He was out jogging, and we struck up a conversation. He asked if he could have some water, and I let him in for a drink. And as usual, Cookie was growling, tail tucked and ears back, just like with the delivery driver. I told her to go away, and she backed off, though wouldn't stop giving Greg the stink eye. He had made himself at home in the armchair by the TV area and was remarking on what a nice place I have and asking, "Is it just you here?" when I heard my recorded voice from the living room. Stranger. Smell now the fact Greg had appeared on my street, casually jogging up the sidewalk. Well, it had sent up some red flags. He'd always been a little creepy as a supervisor. Not enough to go to bring a complaint forward or anything, but enough that I felt awkward about seeing him on my street. So when Cookie pressed the button saying she smelled a stranger, it sent my pulse racing. Could this be the same stranger she smelled on the day I found the footprint outside the window? I told Greg I had to take her out for a quick potty break, and while outside I phoned a friend and asked them to pretend it was an emergency. I came back in with my friend shouting loudly enough on my phone for Greg to overhear, and I told him something had come up and I had to run. We both went outside, and I locked up and got in my car and waited until he was gone before I went back inside my house. I checked the cameras, wondering if I'd find evidence of him snooping around my house. But there was nothing. I assumed that my fears had been overblown, that maybe I had freaked out at Greg unfairly, and Cookie had pressed those buttons because she didn't like men. But 2 days later, the cameras caught him. On a Saturday afternoon when my car was gone and I was obviously not home, Greg came strolling up my sidewalk. He looked around, seemingly trying to act casual, and then he went right to the potted plant, which he lifted. Searching for the key, I felt nauseated watching the footage, and glad I had trusted my gut and Cookie's warnings about the bad vibes I was getting from him. I arranged to have the locks changed and a security system installed, and informed my neighbors to be on the lookout. I did some extra button practice with Cookie to make sure she'd alert me if necessary. When I informed my boss, Greg was immediately let go. He sent me some expletive-filled, threatening emails and messages accusing me of ruining his life before I blocked him and filed a restraining order. That was all weeks ago. But the reason I'm writing about it now is because yesterday, Cookie hit the stranger button again. Of all buttons, that one always got a reaction from me. I immediately got up and asked her, "Stranger, where?" She turned a circle and whined and then pressed home. That sent my pulse through the roof. I checked all through the house. No signs of intrusion. Nothing on camera either. My fluttering heart slowed. "No stranger," I told her. She sulked and wandered away. She was out of sorts the rest of the evening. Then today, she hit the button again mad. She pushed. And then, stranger. Mad. It was nonsensical. I found myself trying to piece together, meaning the way so many other owners do when their dogs use buttons in a way that doesn't make sense. Was she calling me a stranger because I haven't given her enough treats or pets lately? As in, don't be a stranger? But I knew that was a huge stretch. Was she saying she was mad because I wasn't listening to her about the stranger? Maybe. But there was no stranger. I checked everywhere, including the cameras. And then, because that button in particular always got me extra freaked out, I looked up Greg, just to make sure he hadn't resumed stalking me. I went to his socials, where it was clear from his recent posts he still definitely held a grudge. He'd made a bunch of rants blaming me for his life, spiraling ever since his job loss. Other posts claimed he had nothing left to live for, but the part that chilled me to the core? I found his obit. He ended his own life 2 days ago. I bought talking buttons for my cat, but the cat wasn't the only one who used them. It's actually my youngest son's cat who learned to use the buttons. I inherited the cat after my son lost control of his car on the icy roads last winter. It happened on the day he received a scholarship to his top college choice. He and his boyfriend were feeling on top of the world and were on their way back home from a trip. His boyfriend survived. He did not. You cannot imagine the grief. Either you have experienced the loss of a child or you haven't. I did not weep, not at the funeral nor for many weeks after. I became a stone, an object. It was as if all the sorrow were locked far from reach. Instead of feeling anything, I simply thought many times of retrieving the pistol that I own from its case in the back of my closet. And on a few occasions, I even went and took it and sat with it, feeling its weight in my hand. My son Vinny to his friends was my world. One day he would have been famous, I am sure of it. You may think that is a father's pride talking. Maybe it is. But he had a music scholarship. He would have performed for presidents and world leaders. In my mind, when I see him, it is usually at his piano, playing for his cat. When he was 15, I promised him a kitten if he did well in school, and he picked out this tabby, the tiniest and angriest tabby in the world, and named her Terry. She loved only him and hissed and growled at anyone else who came near, including me. She also peed on his clothes, and on mine, and on my bed. To say I wanted to get rid of terrible Terry, as I called her, is an understatement. But then my brilliant son died, and suddenly it was just me and terrible Terry and the gun. I felt nothing but resentment toward the cat. But she spent hours and hours slouched on the windowsill in his bedroom where she always sat while he played piano. I used to think she sat there to watch the birds and couldn't care less about his playing. Now, she didn't even lift her head. She just loafed on the sill, as if waiting for him to come bursting in and pull the dust cover off and play. And there were the buttons. You've seen them, I'm sure. Those gimmicky buttons that people get to train animals to talk. Bunch of nonsense if you ask me. What has a dog got to say? Nothing but food, probably. And anyway, people are supposed to give commands to dogs, not the other way round. But Vinny would watch all these videos of dogs, and sometimes cats pressing the buttons, even though, to be honest, the cat videos he showed me looked like the cats walking onto the buttons completely by accident. And that's what I told him. Complete waste of money. People wishfully projecting their ideas onto their pets. The cat pressed, "Love you," and meant it? Ha! Cats only know hunger and selfish desires. Well, my stubborn, dreamy-eyed, cat-loving son bought a set of those buttons. He pre-recorded dozens of them, but began with just a handful. Food, cuddle, outside music, dad, and Vinny. Yes, he put me and himself as buttons, and music too, because he was convinced in his silly teenaged way that the cat liked his music and might want to request it. Terry was terrified of those buttons. No matter how he tried to train her, she refused to use them. She hissed. She swatted. She wouldn't go near them. She knew exactly what they were for. I'm sure of it. She even knew the words, because he'd say to her, "Let's have some music," and she would go to her perch by the piano and wait for him. But when it came to the buttons, she refused. Terry loved those buttons about as much as I loved Terry. But then, like I said, came the accident. Suddenly my son was gone. The house felt wrong, empty. Terry was a husk. I put food out, but she didn't eat. I didn't know how to read her signals. She hissed at me if I came near. I decided I should get rid of her. I couldn't keep his cat. The cat hated me anyway. I will get rid of her, I thought, and then I will be done with me too. But I couldn't bring myself to get rid of my son's cat, and I couldn't shoot myself while the cat was still alive. And so we were stuck, me and the cat. And then one night, I was up in my room contemplating the gun when I heard the recorded voice. Downstairs, "Speak, Vinny." I assumed it must be a mistake. She must have walked over the button. But then it came again. "Vinny, Vinny, Vinny." I stood there, listening to that cat press Vinny over and over, and tears came into my eyes. It was like a key turning in a lock, a crack in the dam that then finally burst. I gasped, loud, gulping sobs. Finally, the tears came for my son. And when the flood was over, I came down and found tiny Terry sitting by the buttons, looking miserable. And I scooped her up and told her, "I miss him too." And for once, She didn't swat me. She gave only the smallest growl. I put her down and got her some food. Got myself some too. We both ate. That was the beginning. Since then, I've added more buttons. You see, I'm not an animal person. I didn't understand Terry's body language, her wants and needs, without the buttons. She finally started using them, training me. I guess they say cats do that. She has a wet food button, a kibble button. She has a NO button to use if I show her the wrong food. I also added from my son's collection the love you button. Yes, I confess, I did add it, and a Terry button. And I began to make a habit of pressing love you Vinny and love you Terry. I was genuinely in shock how much she communicated. The first time she pressed Dad love you, I almost broke down all over. I couldn't believe it. She looked like she wasn't even trying. She just casually walked over the buttons. But it was deliberate. It happened more than once. I still hadn't learned to read her cat body language at all. But with the buttons, I understood her. And I felt like I had a part of my son with me. Sometimes she said things that just cracked open my soul, like when she looked at me with those big round eyes one time and hit Vinny home. I wish he was home too, I told her. It was uncanny, the things we could discuss. We'd have entire conversations. I know it sounds nuts. I'd have thought myself nuts just a couple of months before, but I added buttons so fast, and she took to all of them. I asked her once if she understood what happened to Vinny. She replied with Vinny bye-bye. I'd added the bye-bye button to tell her whenever I was leaving the house. Then she asked me Vinny home. I had to tell her no, Vinny bye-bye. And she stubbornly insisted again Vinny home, and she walked away angry, I think, that I couldn't make Vinny come back. But the reason I'm sharing this story, and sharing this story here, is because of what happened last week. Last week, my son Liam came to see me. Liam is Vin's older half-brother. He's nearly a decade older than Vin from a previous relationship, and unfortunately, Liam inherited all of his mother's worst traits. It is always the same with him. He begs for money, gets abusive if I do not give it, and disappears once I have made him a loan he will never repay. I cut off all funds to him a few years ago and told him I would no longer enable his habits. While I'd never cut him entirely out of my life, I hadn't allowed him to visit when Vinny was alive because of the way he'd treated Vinny on a previous visit, when he'd sneeringly accused me of favoring that mincing little. I won't repeat his hateful words for his younger brother. When he showed up on my doorstep, he had the smell of whiskey on his breath, and he looked wild-eyed and anxious. "Dad," he said, and then hugged me tight. "I'm sorry about Vin." It shocked me so much, I hugged him right back, and he came in and sat down and asked how I was doing. He was surprisingly solicitous. I didn't understand why. His usual meanness didn't come through at all until he noticed a growling Terry. "You still have that little piss queen?" he asked and reached a hand for her, only for her to swat and run away. "Little shit," he said. "Her name is Terry," I said defensively. He laughed. "Didn't you used to call her Terrible Terry? She doesn't pee on things anymore." From the button area came protresses of B-E-B-E. "She wants you to go bye-bye," I said. "She can fuck off. She's not your son. I am." Bye-bye? I didn't like the way he talked to the cat. Though a few minutes later, after she peed on his shoes, I found his anger more understandable, and I locked her up to prevent him from harming her. But he seemed genuinely sad about Vinny, and even asked about Vinny's boyfriend and his recovery after the crash. I wondered if he had come over to try to patch things up between us. Maybe to start off on better footing, like me and Terry had, until he asked me what was going to happen to Vinny's college fund. "I haven't decided yet," I told him. "I'm still processing all of this." But he's not going to use it, right? I mean, even before the accident. The money you'd been saving for him, he had a scholarship, right? He wasn't going to need it, and he definitely won't need it now. "Dad, I could use a loan." "Liam, you still have one son left, Dad," he burst, and there was the old rage. "Why do you always treat me like this? Even when he's dead, he still deserves more than I do. I bet you cut me out of your will too, huh?" "I did not." "You didn't?" "No, you both get equal shares." "Oh, okay, he calmed down. "Sorry, I have a lot of resentment, I guess. I'm sorry. But about the loan, is there any way?" I will have to think on it. Okay. You think I'll make us drinks, okay? I should have known what was happening when he went into the kitchen and was fumbling around longer than necessary. I should have known. But how could I? I had already lost one son. How could I suspect the other? How could I imagine the worst? I wanted to believe things would be better. I drank the alcohol he put in front of me without thinking. I assumed the wooziness was just the booze. It had been a long time since I'd had a real drink. Somewhere in the bedroom where she was locked up, Terry was howling her little heart out. I'd never heard her make those sounds and said I was going to let her out, but when I got up, the whole world lurched. Liam's arms caught me and he said, "Got you, Dad," and then kept whispering in my ear, his breath still reeking, Sorry, but you're making me do this. If you'd just give me that fucking loan." I didn't start to panic, really panic, until he propped me up on the sofa and went upstairs with the question, "You still keep your gun in the closet?" The fear hit me in a wave then. I felt like I was floating, like I was drifting away from my body, like I was lost in some strange and horrible dream. I tried to stand, to stumble to the table and grab my phone, but I fell and heard the crack of my head against the table's edge. The ground came up to meet me. Pain shot through my skull. Footsteps thudded overhead. Cursing as he rifled through my closet, I tried to pull myself up again. Finally managed to grab my phone. The screen swam in my vision. My fingers were fat and clumsy as I tried to push the keys to call for help. A hand smacked the phone out of my grip. "It's 'cause you won't help me," Liam rambled as he again wrapped his arms around me to try to get me onto the sofa. "Everyone knows you're depressed. Suicidal. Can't handle Vinny's death. You should just done it, man. If you'd just done it, I wouldn't have to." "Pluh," I gasped. "This is the only way. This is how it was going to be anyway. You don't even want to live anyway. In your own way, you're helping me out here in the end," he said. And then, in response to the howling from the other room, he suddenly shrieked, "Shut the fuck up!" The howling stopped. Liam glared toward the door, his breaths coming hard and fast, then looked back at me. Everything had become so blurry. His words were a garble, his features a haze. I felt the cold muzzle of the gun against my temple as my heart galloped in my chest. From Vinny's room came a sharp rustle, like a curtain or a sheet, and then the piano, the notes of a piano. "The hell?" Liam's voice slurred through my drugged haze. "Is someone here?" The playing continued, unsteady but beautiful, unmistakably Claire de Lune, just like Vinny had always played, but slower. And I wondered, it couldn't be the cat, could it? It almost sounded like the cat walking deliberately across the keys the same way she walked across the buttons. But that would have been impossible. "Who? There?" snarled Liam. "VV," was all I could manage. He snatched up the gun and stalked toward the bedroom door. In my blurry vision, he wavered back and forth. And when he opened the door, there, at the piano, was a figure, flickering and impossible. A figure that both was and was not there. And Liam screamed and raised his arm and the world exploded as the gun went off. And then there was the yowling of the cat. And the cat came charging out, all bristling like a tiger, and with her that same figure from the piano. And Liam was screaming in terror and fired the gun again and ran out the door. What I remember next is waking in the ER. Neighbors apparently called police after hearing the gunshots. When I was discharged and returned home, my head wrapped from the concussion, I was relieved to find Terry whole and unharmed. She hurried over to greet me, tail up. I'd finally started picking up her body language to know a greeting when I saw it. But it wasn't just the tabby greeting me, I knew. You see, I'd finally realized something. A cat can't play a piano, and this cat couldn't use buttons. Not of her own volition. Maybe it hadn't been Terry talking to me all along. Maybe it was and always had been Vinny. And so as I extended my hand and Terry rubbed my knuckles, I told her, "I love you. I won't ever hurt myself. I promise I will survive. You can be free. I love you." Terry rubbed my hand again and rubbed my face when I bent my head to hers. Then she patted over to the buttons and walked across them. And I listened to my son's recorded voice, love you, bye-bye. Terry hasn't touched those buttons since. But Every once in a while when I'm very deep in dreams, I think I hear the sound of the piano. My pet chimp braided my hair and killed 3 people. My mom raised a chimp like he was family. He ate cereal at the table, played with my hair while I watched TV, and last week he brutally murdered 3 people in our house. I know how this sounds. I know what they're saying behind my back already. This happened 6 nights ago. I haven't slept properly since. Every time I start to drift off, I see that bird first. Not the blood, not the house, not even Ben. The bird. My mom was a primatologist. That was her whole life. She worked with chimps, wrote papers nobody in town ever bothered reading, and spent half her time telling people they weren't basically hairy little men in waistcoats, which is how most of our neighbors talked about them. When I was 12, she brought home an infant chimp that had been rejected by its troop. Dad lost his fucking mind over it. Mom won, obviously. That chimp became Ben. He grew up in our house before Dad and Mom had a proper enclosure built out back. Mom treated him like a son. I treated him like an annoying little brother. My little sister Erin adored him. Dad tolerated him the way men tolerate things they know they're never going to win against. By the time Ben was older, he was strong and too unpredictable to have indoors full time. He was still family. Weird family, but family. Mom taught him all sorts of things. Hand signals, matching games, colors. She even got him one of those soundboard apps on an iPad. He could tap pictures and make the thing say words in that flat robot voice. Banana, outside, play, love you. The first time he hit love you in the right context, Erin cried. Mom cried too. Dad rolled his eyes and went outside for a cigarette, which was basically his version of being overwhelmed. Then Mom died last year. Brain aneurysm. No warning. One minute she was rinsing blueberries in the kitchen. The next she was gone. Everything after that split into a before and after. Dad started taking longer and longer work trips. Erin stayed at the house because she was still in 6th form. I was away at college, only coming back when I could. Ben stayed in the enclosure because someone had to keep feeding him, cleaning up after him, checking the fencing, pretending this had all not been Mom's thing. The house is about 20 acres out, right where Corvus Vale gives up and the forest begins. Pine trees, mud tracks, one long gravel drive, no close neighbors, no houses you can see from the porch. At night it feels like the dark starts at the tree line and just keeps coming. I came home for spring break last week. I brought my best friend Kate, because she said if I was going to spend a week in the middle of nowhere, pretending not to be depressed in my childhood home, I at least needed someone fun there. Her roommate Nick came too, mostly because he had nowhere else to go, and because Kate had been half flirting with him all semester. Erin invited her boyfriend Tyler at the last minute without asking me. That irritated me more than it should have, but I let it go. I noticed the crow before I'd even killed the engine. It was sitting on one of the fence posts near Ben's enclosure. At first, I thought it was just the sunlight hitting it strangely, some trick of the late afternoon light. Then I looked properly and realized no, it really was white. Not gray, not patchy, not dust-covered. White, pure white feathers, black eyes, black beak. It sat there like it had every right to be on our property, head tilted, watching the car. Kate leaned forward between the seats and said, "What the fuck is that?" I actually felt relieved hearing her say it, because it meant I wasn't imagining things. Crow," I said. "No shit," she said. "Why is it white?" I didn't answer because I didn't have one. The bird didn't move when we got out. It just watched us drag bags from the boot and argue about who was sleeping where. Nick took one look at the trees and said, "This is where people disappear." Tyler laughed too loudly at that. Erin told him to stop being weird. I kept looking back at the fence post. The crow stayed there until Ben spotted me. He let out this excited panting chirp and slapped both hands against the bars of the enclosure. The second I walked over, he started jabbing at the iPad mounted to the side panel. "Sarah home. Happy. Happy." He hit happy 3 times in a row. That got me. I won't lie. It got me right in the throat. He looked healthy. A little shaggy maybe, but healthy, bright-eyed, alert. He reached his arm through the bars and patted at my sleeve until I gave him grapes from the bucket by the gate. Kate laughed when he deliberately ignored Tyler and tapped play instead while staring at me. "He remembers who matters," she said. Tyler rolled his eyes. "It's a monkey with an iPad." "Chimp," Aaron snapped. Ben bared his teeth at Tyler like he agreed. For a little while, it almost felt normal. That was the worst part. The way it felt normal first. We grilled burgers on the back deck. Nick got drunk faster than everyone else and started telling terrible ghost stories about Corvus Vale. Kate filmed Aaron trying to dance on the grass in her socks. Tyler kept trying to impress people by wandering too close to the enclosure, like Ben was some zoo attraction there for his entertainment. The white crow moved once. That was it. From the fence post to the roof. I saw it silhouetted up there against the evening sky, still as a weather vane, and something about that bothered me more than if it had been flapping around and making noise. It didn't caw. It didn't hop. It just sat there above the house like a marker. By 11, the fire pit was down to embers, and we'd switched from music to that loose, half-bored conversation people have when they're drunk and don't want the night to end. Erin said she was going to check on Ben before bed. She knew his routines better than any of us by then. A few seconds later, she screamed. Not a startled scream, not a little yelp, a full-throated, panicked scream that made every hair on my arms stand up. We all ran. Ben was pacing hard enough to shake the enclosure panels. Foam clung to the corners of his mouth. His eyes looked wrong. Wild, unfocused, too bright. Erin was backed away from the bars with one hand over her mouth. "There's blood," she kept saying. "There's blood on him." There was. A wet patch on his shoulder. Fresh. Matted fur around a bite wound. I remember Tyler saying, "Probably a fox," like that was remotely normal. Nick asked if chimps could get rabies and nobody answered him. Ben slammed both hands into the bars so hard the whole enclosure rattled. Kate swore and stumbled backwards. I tried talking to him, using the calm voice Mum used, but he wouldn't even look at me properly. He was panting and drooling and moving in jerky little bursts that made my stomach turn. We should have called animal control, or the police, or literally anyone with trangs and a clue. Instead, we argued. Dad kept emergency sedatives in a locked box inside the utility room, but Aaron didn't know where the key was. Tyler said we could corner Ben if we had enough people. Kate told him he was out of his fucking mind. Nick was already trying and failing to get signal. I was half in shock and half still trying to tell myself there had to be another explanation. I don't know how long we wasted. 5 minutes maybe. 10. Too long. Because by the time I ran back outside with the key box, the enclosure door was open. Ben was gone. For one horrible second, nobody moved. Then the porch light flickered. Once. Twice, and everything went black. Kate was in the kitchen when it started. She'd gone in through the back door to grab the emergency torch from the drawer by the sink. I was only a few steps behind her. I heard the sound before I understood it. A heavy impact. A rattle of glass. Then a wet crunch that did not belong in any normal house. Kate didn't even get a scream all the way out. She made this short, shocked sound, and then there was a spray of something dark across the fridge door, and she went down. Ben came through the back doorway on all fours. I know how stupid that sounds, but it's true. He moved wrong, too fast, too low. His limbs looked too long in the dark, his shoulders bunching and shifting under fur slick with blood and rain. When he lifted his head, I saw his mouth hanging open, strings of saliva catching what little moonlight came through the glass. Tyler shouted and lunged for him. I ran. I hate that about the story, but I'm not changing it. I ran. Nick slammed the kitchen door behind us, and Erin was already halfway up the stairs, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Tyler was still downstairs. I heard him hit something. Maybe Ben, maybe the wall, and then I heard him scream. Not for long, just long enough. We made it to my old bedroom and shoved the dresser against the door. Nick was shaking so badly he dropped his phone twice, trying to call 911. No signal, no bars, no anything. Erin was covered in Tyler's blood or Kate's or both. I remember grabbing her face and telling her to look at me, keep breathing, while something hit the door downstairs hard enough to rattle the frames on the landing wall. Then came the tearing. I don't know how else to describe it. Wet, steady, deliberate. The kind of sound that tells you something alive has become meat. Nick started making these horrible little gagging noises. Erin buried her face in my shoulder. I sat there staring at the bedroom door, waiting for footsteps, for pounding, for the handle to move. Instead, I noticed the window. The white crow was on the branch just outside. It was so close I could see individual feathers. Moonlight turned it almost silver. It didn't blink. It didn't peck the glass. It just looked in at us as if this was exactly what it had come for. I remember whispering, "What the hell are you?" as if that was the right question. Below us, floorboards creaked. Then the noise changed. Not the stairs. Outside, a scraping sound against the siding. Ben knew the house. He'd lived in it when he was small. He used to climb everything, the porch beams, the gutters. Mum once found him on the garage roof looking smug as anything. So when I heard knuckles thudding softly against the outside wall and moving upward, I knew before I even crossed the room what I was going to see. Ben was climbing toward the window. Erin saw him and let out this awful broken sound. She rushed forward before I could stop her and put both hands against the glass. "Benny," she said, sobbing. "Benny, please, it's us." He hit the window hard enough to crack it. Not a huge shattering blow. Just one brutal slam of both hands that sent a white fracture through the corner. Erin screamed and stumbled back. Nick grabbed the lacrosse stick from beside my wardrobe. I hadn't touched that thing in years, and stood there with it raised like he actually thought it would do something. Ben hit the glass again. The crack spread. Nick said, "If he gets through, we're dead," which was not useful but wasn't wrong either. Then he did the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. He unlocked the window, only a few inches. Just enough, I think, to try and jab at Ben with the stick and push him off balance. The second that gap opened, Ben's arm shot through. It happened so fast my brain still replays it wrong sometimes. 1 second Nick was lifting the stick. The next his wrist was in Ben's hand and his face changed completely, like every thought he'd ever had vanished at once. He made one sound. I won't write it. I can still hear it too clearly. Blood hit the carpet in thick dark ropes. Ben forced Nick through the window, shattering the frame, dropping him to the gravel below. There was a pause, then Ben was forcing himself through after him, all muscle and snarling and broken glass. I dragged Erin out into the hallway so hard she nearly fell. We ran for the attic pull-down at the end of the landing because it was the only place left. I yanked the cord. The ladder dropped. Erin scrambled up first. I shoved her from below, climbed after her, then pulled the ladder back up with both hands while something moved below us in the dark. For a second, all I could hear was our breathing. Then came the dragging, something heavy moving across the floorboards downstairs. Then stopping, then moving again. We stayed in that attic all night. No phones, no light except the tiny bit of moonlight sneaking in through the vent, dust everywhere, old boxes pressing into our knees. Erin shaking so hard I thought her teeth would crack. And through it all, every time I crawled to that vent and looked out, the white crow was still there. Sometimes on the roof peak, sometimes on the fence by the enclosure, once on the hood of Dad's car. Always facing the house, always silent. I started to get this crawling feeling that it wasn't watching Ben at all. It was watching us, watching me specifically. Like it was waiting to see what I would do. Like it had been waiting longer than tonight. Somewhere around 3 or 4 in the morning, I heard a sound below us that nearly made me pass out. The iPad, that cheerful, flat, synthetic voice. Play. Then, after a long pause, "Love you." Erin clamped both hands over her mouth to stop herself making noise. I grabbed her wrist so hard she cried out anyway, small and sharp, and everything went quiet below us. Completely quiet. No pacing, no dragging, no breathing. Nothing. We sat there frozen, listening to silence with our whole bodies. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then somewhere outside, wings beat once. That was the only sound. At first light, I looked through the vent again and the crow was gone. That scared me more than when it had been there. I made us wait another hour, maybe longer. Time had gone strange by then. The house was still. Too still. Aaron kept whispering that we had to leave, that we had to run, that Tyler might still be alive. I think part of me knew he wasn't, but I couldn't say it. Eventually, I lowered the attic ladder. We climbed down into a house that no longer felt like ours. I'm not going to describe every room. I don't need to. There was blood on walls it should never have reached. Smears along the banister. Torn fabric. Broken frames. The kitchen looked like someone had thrown red paint everywhere and then dragged furniture through it. I kept my body turned so Erin couldn't see more than she already had. Ben was in the living room, curled on the sofa. That's what broke me more than anything else. Not crouched in attack mode. Not waiting behind a door. Just curled there the way he used to when Mum would let him inside during storms. His chest was heaving. His fur was soaked dark. His eyes looked glassy and wrong, but there was something exhausted in him now too. Burned out. Used up. The white crow was perched on the inside windowsill, inside. I still don't know how it got in. It was looking at Ben, then at me, then back at Ben again. I took one slow step backwards. Ben lifted his head a fraction. His mouth opened. No sound came out. I backed into the hallway, grabbed Dad's car keys from the hook by the utility room, and got Aaron out through the front door. I don't remember the drive to the sheriff's station. I know I did it. I know Aaron was screaming at me to go faster, and I know I nearly put the car in a ditch twice, but I don't remember the road itself. It's just blank. The deputies did not believe us at first. Then they saw the house. After that, they believed some of it. They found Kate, Tyler, Nick. They found Ben too, barely alive. Still on the sofa. A vet from the next town over came in with animal control. They put him down there in the living room, while I sat in the sheriff's station wrapped in a blanket that smelled like stale coffee and bleach. One of the deputies said it was the humane thing. I nearly punched him for saying humane. Since then, they've asked the same questions over and over. Why didn't you call sooner? Why is there so little blood on your clothes? How did two girls make it out of that house alive? Where is Tyler's phone? Why do your timelines keep shifting by a few minutes each time? I tell them because I was terrified. Because we were hiding. Because time doesn't move properly when people are being butchered downstairs. Because I don't know where Tyler's fucking phone is. And because none of them want to hear about the crow. The one female deputy listened longer than the others. She let me talk until I got to the part about the bird being inside the house. Then her face changed in that polite, careful way people's faces change when they've decided grief has tipped you over the edge. I stopped mentioning it after that. Until that is, the results back from the necropsy. Ben didn't have rabies. No infection. No damaged brain tissue. No disease they could find that would explain what he did. The bite wound on his shoulder was shallow. Not enough blood loss to matter. Not enough trauma to send him feral. According to the vet, he was healthy. Healthy. I made the deputy repeat that twice because I thought I'd heard him wrong. He asked if I was still there. I told him yes. Then I asked what could make a healthy chimp tear through 3 people and look at me like that. He didn't answer. After the call, I went outside because I suddenly couldn't breathe in my own kitchen. It was raining. There was a white feather on the back step. I don't know how it got there. I don't have to look up to know. I haven't yet. I think if I do, it'll be there. Watching. Waiting for me to understand that Ben was never the thing I should have been afraid of.